All right. Good evening, everyone. My name. Oh, people coming. Good evening. My name is Lina Ling. Momo and I are the co-founder of VVVSS Summer School, and just a brief introduction. Both Momo and I, we are Andover moms. Our kids goes to school in Andover, and both Momo and I, how do I put it? We are always interested in education, and a few years ago, a couple of friends of mine, and we set up a nonprofit organization called the Neo Millennium Institute in Andover, and oh, by the way, Momo is the member of the board of trustee at our local private school, Pike School in Andover. And it starts with our own kids who was like about going to high school, and we were thinking there's something missing and there's something we can do to provide the high school students and family an opportunity kind of beyond, on top of academic study, but it's a way of life, like looking further down on the road, like what kind of future I want our kids to have, and what kind of, it's not just the grades, it's not just like, which school they go, but it's like what kind of people they will become. So of course, go to a good college is a lot of, especially Asian Chinese parents are hoping for. But we would like to help our kids to kind of like open their mind and have a big vision. It's a college is not the highest peak they can achieve in their life. It's just stepstone. It's just a one of, a milestone they kind of like working on. So anyway, I don't want to take too much of time. I already speak 2 minutes. I would like pass the mic to Momo. So she's going to give everyone a brief introduction about our summer school and our program. Then when we will introduce Sheila to everyone, which is the main focus of this tonight's webinar about all the questions in parents' heart. What are we going to prepare our kids to be ready, to be stand out in the college admission application process? So, Momo, I will pass the mic to you, and it's your turn. Thank you.
Thank you for the nice introduction, Linnell. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Hope you're all enjoy the weekend, and thank you so much for taking your precious time to come to our webinar. Like Linnell introduced, I would like to use maybe most 10 minutes to give you an overview of how our summer school is running. We started a great program last year. Invited a lot of master speakers, and we are diving deep a little bit this year, and hopefully it can present for the high school students, provide them a good platform to gain and find passion and gain expertise, and rub them a little bit more for them to shine and shine in their life and shine in front of the college admission officers as well. So with that, I will share my screen and take you a journey to show you our program, and then I will pass the baton to Sheila as Linnell mentioned, and which is the main focus of our webinar today. So we're called Via Vita Veritas Summer School. And the summer school for this year starts right after the July 4th, which is July 6th to 17th, exactly 2 weeks. We have 2 programs. One program is called Leadership Program. It's going through a mock trial. These are our speakers, which I will introduce a little bit later. And the other program parallel to it is Entrepreneurship Program. And these are our master speakers. And both programs will go through some kind of emotional skills training. And these are the master speakers and coaches for the emotional skill training. And let me show you our, okay, I need to get good for my Zoom. Okay, so our website, which are created and made available by our volunteer alumni from last year, which we really much appreciate. By the way, it's VVVSS.org. Once you get in, you can see you can use this promotional code when you register VVVSS21 and get $200 off. Hope I can figure out how to get rid of my Zoom. Okay, there you go. So our mission is to help our students to grow like the masters that we invited. And Via Vita Veritas is basically in Rome, translated to English, road, life, and truth. We want to inspire our students to strive to become master level person in the future and look beyond the academic and social pressure that they face every day so they can discover a passion for life that will sustain them in the year ahead. You're welcome to come to our website, look at some testimonials. These are Instagram updates. Feel free to follow us, but I just want to show you our program for this year very briefly. So for both programs, the students will be able to take communication style analysis. A renowned psychologist from Harvard will help students explore how communication style affect various aspects of life and how to maximize the strength and minimize the negative impact in one's life, both personally and socially. So after our keynote speaker, which we will see in our agenda, this Harvard psychologist, he will individually test every one of our students and then give guidance on how to understand your own communication style and how you can utilize your style and put yourself in a team setting to be a leader or to be a teammate. And after that, with this, our students will be grouped based on their tests and grouped into different few groups throughout the rest of our program. And so let's take a look at the leadership program. Our leadership program is through a mix of master classes, which is in the morning, and interactive small group discussions will be given or moderated by the distinguished attorneys. That will be in the afternoon. And then the whole mock trial leadership program will use the case specifically designed for our students by Attorney Josh, which I will introduce very soon. So they will acquire a working knowledge of our traditional system and gain an understanding of their obligation and responsibility as a citizen. They will be trained for public speaking, for writing, and also at the end, they will have a mock trial with the judges, referees by the side. It's kind of a competition in the end. For the entrepreneurship program, it's very similar style. In the morning, there will be master classes, and in the afternoon, it's going to be small group discussions. I will show you the agenda very soon. So this learning journey will cultivate in the pitch at the end. It will still be in the groups and pitching to renowned venture capital firms. And then, so basically these will, the whole training will cover all aspects of building a business, from the founding team, ideation to finance and legal considerations. They will turn some very crude initial idea into some solutions and forming into a company. Our master speakers, forgive me that I have to go up. For the leadership programs, we have the honor to invite very renowned lawyers. Paul Dacier used to be, can see, the chairman of the Massachusetts Judicial Nominating Commission by Governor Charlie Baker. And he's the chair. This committee nominates all the judges in Massachusetts. And he was our master speaker last year. Wonderful, wonderful teacher and coach. And Jay Carney used to be the defense lawyer of the famous Whitey Bulger, if you have watched a movie about him. And Jim O'Connell is a top American litigator for so many years. He's the best lawyer in America for so many years. And Doreen Rochelle is also in that 21-person committee, and she's on the prosecution side. So 3 of them covers the history overview of the law, defense side for criminal litigation, and prosecution side for criminal. And Josh is our grand mock trial coach. He will be coaching almost all the afternoon sessions because he has more than 10 years of coaching the mock trial program in all Massachusetts. He organizes the Massachusetts state level mock trial, and he leads the national championship team for quite a few years, for the past few years. And he's a great attorney as well. And very quickly, Henrik, Victoria, and Andy are all professors from Harvard Business School or Harvard Extension School. Andy was here, both Henrik and Andy were here last year, and they got very, very good feedback from our students because they give Harvard level education. They let our students know beforehand that they will treat, although we're only high school students, but treat them as Harvard students, and let our students to be prepared to be pitching in the board room. So that's how they gave our students the class. And although it was very intensive, it was full of fun, the kids really loved it. And feel free to watch some of our videos on Facebook or Instagram. And Saurabh is a MIT and Harvard student. He's now a PhD student of Andy. He will lead some of our afternoon sessions. And Erdine is the grandmaster for our coaches for the afternoon sessions, mostly lead the group sessions. He founded the boot campus at MIT specifically for the entrepreneur program, which is still a great success. And he really loved our program, and he joined our summer school this year. We're very excited for him to come aboard. And Daryl is the Harvard psychologist. He works with especially the Harvard athletic team and the staff. And he will be working on the communication style coaching. And Ben Bulger, I'll let you read later if you're interested, but he will give a series of programs for the parents on how to prepare the kids for college admission. And Judith is a world-renowned coaches for business etiquette, because we believe a lot of minute, small gestures, manners matter a lot. And she was here last year with us, teaching the kids how to eat, how to dine, how to shake hands, how to even say hello. And when there are awkward situations, how do you deal with it? And this year, because everything's going online, she crafted a program, a curriculum that will coach the kids how to do online Zoom meeting, online interviews that will prepare you very well in the future for your college admission interview and beyond. So we're very excited to have her back again. So with that, I will go back to, pardon me, I will go back to our slides. And so very quickly, sorry, Sheila, I will take 2 more minutes. Thank you for your patience. So as you can see, for both leadership program and the next slide is entrepreneurship program, we have keynote speaker, which will hone in on emotional skills, because we believe that, and also how you find passion, how you deal with a lot of struggles for high school students, followed by Daryl. And in the morning is the master classes on prosecution, defense, civil litigation. We are also inviting a judge. A few judges, we're trying to confirm with one of them. And then in the afternoon, Josh will lead introduction, direct cross-exam, witness, opening, closing arguments, objection, evidence, and opening, closing statements. And then followed by Josh's very experienced training on kids writing, demonstration, and persuasive public speaking. These are all led, both programs will be led by Josh for these trainings. And then we will end with competition and awards. They will watch each other between programs, competition and awards on that afternoon. So again, we will have overview, armchair innovation, marketing, legal, patent, market safari, finance, raising money, and then followed by in the afternoon in the different aspects, but in a group session that they can practice on. And finally, they will form a team, they will form an idea and solution, and then learn how to do the presentation with a coach there to give them feedback and critique. And the last day end with Josh's public speaking training, and then finalize their presentation. And then they will go for pitch and awards. With that, I will end. Here is how to register. You will get $200 discount. You don't need to sign in on the website as a member to do that. because we see a lot of people trying to sign in. The signing is only for people who already registered. We will give some of the reading materials, some preview materials before the summer school. So you can just go directly register. If you are interested, feel free to make a screenshot, and you can scan this QR code to join our WeChat group. And there you can have more, we can have more discussions if you're interested. I will stop here and give Sheila directly the baton. If you have any question, you will have plenty of time to ask questions. If I may kindly ask you to be patient. I will stop share and let me introduce you to Sheila. So Sheila is the president and COO of Signet's Education. She's a former commodities trader on Wall Street. She enjoys teaching math for the SAT and the GRE because doing so calls on her quantitative abilities honed during her undergraduate pre-med years at Harvard. She also she speaks 7 languages, which is very much impressive. She gained her bachelor degree and master in Near Eastern Languages and Civilization from Harvard University. She moved on to Indiana University to get her PhD in comparative literature and PhD in Near Eastern Languages and Cultures. We worked with Sheila. She came to our summer school last year, and our families and students very much benefited her advice. And we hope the best for the families who continue to work with her. And we feel because Signet and Sheila have such great expertise on help kids preparing for college admission, especially in the area of preparing them for different kinds of tests and give them the advice on which one to even take. We'd like to start our seminar series with Sheila to kick it off. With that, the floor is yours, Sheila.
Thank you, Meng, and thank you, Linnell. Thank you both for having me here. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to people about this subject. It's one of my favorite subjects. And I also feel that the mission of your summer school is so closely aligned with our philosophy at Signet that this is such a great fit, that every student who goes through your program is necessarily going to be a better college applicant, a better human being, and hopefully have a better future because of what you do. So thank you for all of that. So I'm going to try to move quickly because I do want to cover as much as I can. I know everyone has a lot of questions, but if you do have questions, please do put it in the chat. And we can try to get to them at the end. So my goal today is to give you an overview of what goes into college admissions and what actually matters, because there's a lot of talk I'm sure you hear from other parents in your school or you read on the internet, this matters more, that matters more, don't do this because it's going to hurt you in this way. There is a lot of talk out there. And what you really need to do is kind of come back to basic principles, find a way to demystify the process for you, set goals for you and your student, and then methodically go after those goals. So I do want to give you an overview so you can start to see what matters and how you can make a difference in some of these areas to prepare yourself for college admissions. All right, so the first thing I want to do is talk about the elements of a college application. Many of you may know some of this already, but what I've done here is put these elements in a rough order of importance to the most selective colleges. So the National Association of College Admissions Counselors does a survey every year of over 3,000 colleges, and they give the information publicly and show us what they say, what these college admissions officers say matters most to them in their process. And among the highly selective schools, these are the things that matter in this order. Now, there is no formula that this matters 15% and this one is 5%. Doesn't really work like that. But in general, we know this is where the emphasis lies. So I'm going to highlight just the first sort of 5, 6 things actually on the left side of the slide here: the grades, the rigor of the courses, the SAT and the ACT scores, personal essay, extracurriculars, and teacher recommendations. The other stuff does matter. We just don't have enough time to talk about it all today. But if you have additional questions, I'll leave my email in the chat and you can always email me. We can set up a time to talk. All right. So that I don't have to do all the talking, I've actually asked Meng to ask me some questions so we can pretend that this is a conversation.
Yeah, it's very important. It's on everybody's mind. How can I stand out from so many applicants, wonderful high school students?
Yeah, this is a great question I like to start with, particularly for our Asian students. Now, my family is from South Asia, but we face similar sort of stereotypes and biases in this process. Because our cultures value education so much, our students often end up looking very similar. They have amazing grades. They have great test scores. They all play piano and tennis and violin and cello, and they all do sort of the same things at a very, very high level. So the question becomes, how do I stand out? How do I, make sure they see me as an individual? And how do I present myself so that I'm a compelling applicant for the college, right? I'm really speaking to them about how I'm a good fit. And my advice is to turn inward first. The college application process is a time for self-reflection. And that means really trying to understand, what are your own strengths? What are your weaknesses? What do you want to work on? What kind of people do you want to be around? What situations make you comfortable? What makes you uncomfortable? And where do you find the balance, right? And I talk a lot about fit. And, in US college admissions, everyone says it's all about fit. And fit really is making sure that you have the academic skills and talents to succeed at a school, but that also you're going to fit in there socially. You're going to fit in with the culture of wherever in the United States or the world that this college is, that they have extracurricular opportunities that you're very interested in pursuing or exploring further, right? So it really matches your needs. And that's really key, because so many students think, oh, I'm just going to apply to the top 50 schools or the top 20 schools, but they don't go a step further to think about, how do I fit with that school, or how does that school fit with me? Right? So it's really important to not only research the school so you understand what they have to offer you, but also be really honest with yourself as a student, or as a parent. Help your student to do this sort of reflective work to understand what their vision for their future is, and what are the things and experiences and skills that they need to build during their college years so that they can achieve that vision. Right? And it's extremely important for students to be themselves in this process, not try to fit themselves into some mold of what they think a Harvard student is or what they think a Stanford student is, because in reality, those students are not all the same. They are very diverse in terms of interest, background, culture, things like that. So it's very important that your student be unique. And the best way to do that is to really be themselves and not try to hide anything, or try not to, use fancy language that they don't normally use in the essay, or fit themselves into some mold. It's really important to break the mold and really be themselves. And that's where being genuine comes in, right? And this is going to come across in all aspects of the essay, in the college application, but it should also be something they prioritize just every day in their high school careers, because the more themselves they can be and they figure themselves out, the more the teachers are going to respond to them and build strong relationships with them, and then eventually write a very good, unique recommendation for them. And, the more students really think critically about what extracurriculars they want to invest their time in, or how they want to spend their summers, the more it reflects on that unique being that they are. Right? So this is not something that just happens when you're applying to college in your senior year. This is something that should be happening throughout high school. Okay. The second piece of this is to be strategic, right? So be yourself, and then be strategic about how you present yourself. So again, don't try to be someone that you're not, but think about who your audience is, right? These admissions officers are responding to stories, the story of a student, how they came to be interested in what they're interested in, how they came to have the values they had. And it's really important for you to think about what is your story, right? And the college application is just a very quick little snippet of a student's life, right? So it has to be compelling. That's a word I like to use. And if you think about the trailer for a movie or an ad for something, maybe an Instagram ad, they're very short, right? But they get you interested. And that's what you want your college application to do, right? It's going to be the tip of the iceberg of your very interesting life story, right? So it's important for you to be thinking about, how do all of these things that I'm interested in and that I've spent my time doing, how do they fit together? What's the story that ties all of these things together? And that story, again, is not just going to show up in the essay. It's going to show up in your teacher recommendations, in your activity list, in the courses that you choose, how you spend your summers. It's going to show up in you articulating why a certain college is a match for you, and why you stand out among other applicants. Right? So keep that in mind. We're talking about a bigger picture story here that you are writing for yourself, right? You're writing your own story, as cliche as that may sound. You really are. And then you're going to give a teaser of that story in your college application. Ask me another question.
Can I be very quick? I believe in your company, you have someone who helps with the essay writing, and that person is a former Harvard admission officer.
Yeah, I'll talk about that a little bit. I mean, I have a team of former admissions officers. I do have a former Harvard admissions officer. I have a number of people from University of Pennsylvania, from the Wharton School, from the engineering school there. We've had people from Stanford, from Dartmouth, from University of Michigan, from top liberal arts colleges as well. And so that's really where our guidance comes from, their experience actually reading applications and making decisions to accept or reject students. We also pair students with what we call writing specialists. And these are expert writing coaches. They've taught writing at the high school level, at the university level. Some of them are published authors themselves, and they're really skilled at helping students tell their story. Right? This is often in the college application the first time a student ever has to write about themselves. You're used to writing about a book you've read or some historical event, but all of a sudden you have to turn the camera around and focus on you. And that can be very challenging for students, particularly of this age group. So we pair them with someone who is really skilled at creating the space for them to explore their stories and then help them structure that story, and then of course revise it and polish it until it's, top notch.
Thank you, Sheila. I know I'll try not to ask any questions.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
How do academics factor in, especially, in this situation? Some families are lost, students are lost. Which one is really important, which is not?
Absolutely, yeah. So I mentioned in that list that grades are really the most important factor, and they have gotten even more important given the pandemic, with the loss of testing for many students, also the loss of many extracurriculars for many students. So grades have become much, much more important than ever, but they've always been the most important thing. And it's not just that you have great grades, all A's maybe on your transcript. It's that you're taking classes that are challenging for you. They don't want to see a student taking very easy classes just so they can have all A's. They want you to take the most challenging classes that you can handle. In most cases, I recommend that students stretch a little bit, even if they're a little worried. I don't know if I can handle that third AP, or should I take the honors level of this class or the regular level? I usually encourage them to stretch, because if they're good students, they will rise to the occasion. And hopefully they have some advising from their actual teachers in school too, which will tell them, I think you can handle the honors. I think you could handle this other AP. And of course, if it feels like those are a struggle, that's where a company like Signet can come in as well. We have amazing tutors, most of them from Ivy League schools. Most of them have masters and PhDs. They're experts in their subjects. And beyond that, we hire them because they really know how to communicate with students and meet meet students where they are to help them improve their understanding. I want to stress that grades matter a lot. You need to challenge yourself. The grades in your more advanced classes matter more than your freshman year grades, but it's very important to try to do the best you can throughout high school. If your student had some trouble in freshman or sophomore year and the grades were a little rocky, but then they improved, that's really good too, because that tells a story. That tells a story that maybe they didn't really know how to handle high school, but they figured it out. Right. And so college admissions officers do like to see what we call a positive grade trend. But of course, at the most competitive schools, you're dealing with students from all over the world, really, from the strongest schools everywhere. And you've got some very tough competition. So it's really important for you to put your energy into maintaining your grades. And I mentioned this a little bit already. We provide academic support through the form of tutoring, where students, sometimes it's not even that they're struggling in a class, it's that they want to get ahead in a class. So I had a lot of students this year who couldn't get into, for example, AP economics or AP statistics. They decided to self-study with a tutor, and then they're taking the AP exam on their own. Right? So they didn't actually enroll in the class through their school, but they're covering the material and they're going to have an AP score to show for it as well. And then I also have a number of students who do what we call enrichment tutoring. They may be advanced math students and they want to explore the field at a higher level than their school can offer. And they'll work with one of our PhDs on exploring some advanced math topic. And so that's honestly one of the most enjoyable things that we do when we get to work with a student who is so engaged in the subject that they want to do an independent study. So we really, really enjoy doing that. But beyond that kind of tutoring, we also do something that we call academic coaching, which is really a mix of life coaching and executive function coaching. So this happens with all kinds of students. Sometimes the most brilliant students have really poor organizational skills or poor time management skills, or they're very good at procrastinating. That's the big one, because smart students can do it at the last minute. So why not just leave it till, midnight on Tuesday night before the thing is due? We know that that's not the best way to approach your academics. These brilliant students, if they started earlier, how much better would their end result be if they had given themselves the proper amount of time to write that paper or do that project? So we pair them with our academic coaches to help them build those skills and build plans to work on projects a little bit at a time instead of all at once at the last minute, and get themselves out of those unproductive thought patterns that lead them to procrastination or always seeking perfection with everything they do. That can be a real detriment to students' production as well. They don't want to write anything unless the sentence comes out perfect. Right? And that can really, really slow them down. So there are a lot of things that you can do to help students in those situations. So I encourage you to think about this. This is not just for your senior year of high school. At that point, your grades are really your grades. You're going to submit your college application before your senior year grades come out. So it's important to make sure students have the right foundational skills and the right foundational knowledge early in high school to make sure they can get to those more challenging classes and do well in them, right? So this is something we encourage families to look at early on in high school. If you sense any sort of struggle, or you sense that, they're really good at the STEM subjects, but they hate writing or they hate reading, now is the time to get them some help around those things, because those are really fundamental skills that you want to make sure can shine when the time comes. Okay.
And I have to comment just one sentence, Sheila, that we get our students' feedback, and that your tutors, that you're very good at choosing your tutors into your organization, and they're fabulous. It's not easy to find the right tutor for you, because they have to know what they're doing. But your tutors are really fantastic. That's some of the feedback.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate that.
I'm glad to work with you, with our students. So the next question is, what do we need to know about test scores? That's very important.
The big question this year,
yeah.
definitely last year and this year is a big, big question. So first I'm going to talk like we're not in a pandemic and what do test scores usually mean in the college application process. And a little bit later, we'll come back and talk about what do they mean in a pandemic. So the colleges in the United States will all accept either the SAT or the ACT. They really do not care which one you send them, right? And because the two tests are written slightly differently, even though they pretty much cover the same material, different students are just going to naturally do better on one or the other. And our advice is to figure out which test your student is most naturally suited to, and then invest in preparing for that test alone. You do not need to do both, right? Things are getting back to normal in the United States. Most of the test administrations are going forward now, but last year they weren't. And so what happened was a lot more colleges went test optional or even test blind. And this year, so far, about 60% of colleges and universities in the United States have already announced that they will be test optional for next year's seniors, right? Last year, for this year's seniors, it was something like 95% of schools went test optional or test blind. What that means is you don't have to submit a test score if you don't want to. What we saw in practice was that students who had very high test scores relative to the average for the colleges they were applying to submitted their test scores if they had them. And that absolutely helped them in the process. Now, there are even more schools that are going test blind. So the entire UC system, University of California system, will not look at your test scores if you have them. You can't even send them. So if you know, for example, you're only applying to colleges that are test blind, then you can skip all of this. You don't have to listen to me for the next, 5 minutes because don't waste your time, right? There are more important things that you can invest your time and energy into that will help you in the college process that a test might not. There are other times that I recommend families go test optional as well, as if the student is really struggling in school and doesn't have time to invest in their grades and invest in testing, then I would say the grades are much more important. I also see a lot of students who have undiagnosed learning disabilities or even those executive function challenges that are very, very sharp, do very well in school, but for some reason on the test, everything falls apart. And the amount of time and energy it would take them to practice and study and prepare to get a score that would actually help them in the process, the opportunity cost is just not there. It might take them, a year of studying to get to that score. In that year, they could have founded a club at their school. They could have gotten, higher grades. They could do an amazing summer program. All of those things will matter more than a couple of points on the SAT or the ACT, right? But this is a very nuanced discussion. So it's something that I take very seriously. We actually do a free consultation at Signet around all of this. So if you have questions about, what should you do, please don't hesitate to get in touch. The general process is pick which test. And I recommend doing a practice test to figure out which. Define the goal score that is going to help you in college admissions. Pick your test date and then make a plan from now to the test date of how are you going to get to your goal score, right? And that process can be done in a number of different ways. You can try to do it on your own. There are a lot of resources online. Your school may have some information about it. And then there are like larger testing companies like Princeton Review or Kaplan that will tell you, do my class, and you'll get there. And you might. And those classes do work for a lot of people. I did a Princeton Review class when I was in high school and I got a perfect score. Right? But that is not every student, right? Certain students can do that. But what we do is individual test prep. We match students with a one-on-one tutor. But before we start that process, you go through a consultation with me where we do free diagnostics of both the SAT and the ACT so that you can compare the actual scores and the experience of the test. And I can give you full reports on both of those tests and talk you through which test I think your student should take, what's a realistic goal score given 4 to 5 months of preparation, a test date that you might want to register for, how much prep the student needs, and which topics to study. And you're welcome to take that plan anywhere else. You don't have to come to Signet, though, of course, I prefer that you do. But I want to give people the right information. It pains me so much when people come to me for college admissions and they tell me something crazy about their ACTs. And I'm like, oh, I wish you had called me 6 months ago. I would have told you what to do, right? So please take advantage of this feeling I have and ask me what to do. And I can give you some good advice here and you can figure out what you need. And that whole thing is completely free. So definitely take advantage of it. Okay, we'll come back to testing in a little bit as well.
Okay, now comes, if not the most important that a lot of people feel, what role does the essay play?
Yeah, so the essay looms large in college admissions, not because it is the most important thing, but it's probably the hardest thing. And it's the thing that you have to do in the most concentrated amount of time. Everything else, you have all 4 years of high school to build your extracurriculars, your relationships with teachers, all of your grades. But the essay is something you have to do in a pretty short time frame. And it's hard because, as I mentioned earlier, this is not something students really do often. They don't talk about themselves. They don't write about themselves. They often don't write in this way, this sort of personal memoir sort of way. It's not an analytical essay. So it's hard and it does take a lot of time and there are a lot of essays to write. So the essay plays a huge role because it actually brings your entire story to life, right? It is the single place in the application where the student is speaking in their own voice about who they are and why maybe they're a fit for the college. Everything else is, numbers on a transcript or numbers on a SAT score, or your teacher's talking about you, but you are never talking for yourself except in the essay. So it's extremely important. It can tie all of those pieces together. And again, we're looking for a story here. Admissions officers don't want to read a research proposal or your activity list. They have that, right? You don't need to recap anything else that is in your application, but they want to know who you are and why you've chosen to spend your time the way you have, right? What are your motivations? What are your values? What kind of person are you? And those are big questions that a 17-year-old usually has not spent a lot of time thinking about. So this is one of the places where having someone else work with your son or daughter on that reflection, that creative process can be so valuable. Sometimes teenagers don't want to talk to mom and dad about how they truly feel, or they don't want their mom and dad's input on this. They feel like, no, it won't be me if mom and dad are helping me. So having an outside resource can be very, very helpful. And as I mentioned, this is one of the things that we do. And again, one of the things that we really love doing. Our former admissions officers have read thousands and thousands of applications in their role as an admissions officer. So they really understand what stands out. And they can give you that insight of, if you say this, we're going to be able to read between the lines and know that this didn't really happen to you, or you're embellishing here, or you're not saying enough. You're being too humble. Right? If you say it that way, I'm going to gloss over it and I'm not going to think twice about it. But if you tell me the real story, that's one of the most interesting things about you, right? So that perspective can be invaluable. And then, of course, working with a writing coach as well can really help your student become a better writer and learn better communication skills and how to express themselves and how to tie in emotion, balance all of these elements of their essays, work with an outline, and then learn some very important revision techniques as well. So this whole process, one of the things that we try to do at Signet is help students grow through this process. It's not just at the end of it, you finished an application, go on, do whatever you're going to do. We want to see you figure out who you want to be and take steps towards becoming that person through this process. All right, that's all I'll say about the essay. I could go on and on. It's one of my favorite things to talk about.
Everything is so important. And this is, what about my activity list? I guess that's extracurriculum.
Yeah, it's your extracurriculars. And on the common application, you have 10 spots. Now, some students are involved in more than 10 things. but you have to figure out what are the 10 most important things. How do you represent that there? So this is really a crucial place. A lot of people think about it as, oh, it's just a list, it doesn't matter. But the order you list your activities in, how you describe your activities, how you describe why they're meaningful to you can really contribute to your story. This is a place to spend some time, almost as much time as you spend on your essay, thinking about how to be creative in representing your different activities. And one of the reasons I wanted to highlight this here is because I think your program is such a great thing for students to be able to add to their activity list, because it shows something beyond what students normally do, right? Your program is really focused on helping them grow as people and helping them chart their future path, right? So they are sort of sticking their head out of this high school bubble where they're not just worried about debate club or this sport or what's happening with my group of friends on Instagram. They're really thinking about themselves and their role in the world. And that's one of the things that college admissions officers are looking to see in their activity list. Community engagement is really important, a sense of self-awareness and maturity, a desire to give back. All of that is really important in the activity list. So this is also one of those things that you can start working on now as early as 9th grade, thinking very carefully about what you want to spend your time doing and what that says about you. It's not just do everything you can, it's do things that are meaningful to you and make sure they connected to your overall story. So I wanted to make sure I highlighted that here. I don't know how we are on time. I can skip a little bit if that is helpful, if we need to wrap up.
If you have time, you're welcome to stay. Everyone, you're welcome to stay a little longer if you would like and have the
Great,
time.
thank you. Yeah, I want to leave time for questions. So I'll go quickly through this. I wanted to highlight recommendations as well. I won't wait for you to ask me the question. They are important. And I think during the time of the pandemic, they are even more important than usual. They are also harder than usual. I talk to so many parents who tell me, while school has been remote, their student has not been able to build a relationship with their teacher. They can't ask them questions. They can't, stay after class and share some information about their lives. So it's sort of a double-edged sword here. They are more important, but they're even harder to get good ones now. But they're important because they allow admissions officers to imagine a student in their classroom or on their campus. And while students don't have control over content, there are things they can do to help them get better recommendation letters. And this is one of the things that we coach students on. How do you ask? What do you say? What information do you provide your teacher so that they can reference them while they're writing their recommendations to help them be more unique and stronger? So you want to make sure that teachers are aware of that overall narrative and what your values are and who you are and why you do all the things that you do. So it's important to have a conversation with your teachers about that when you ask. And we always say, pick teachers who know you well. It's better to ask teachers at the end of your junior year than wait until the fall of your senior year. Because those junior year teachers will have known you the whole year and you'll get them before everyone else asks them. So make sure if you're a junior now, make sure you ask a teacher or two teachers before this year is out. The other thing I wanted to highlight is through the opportunities in your program, outside recommendations can become very important. So if a student is able to form a relationship with one of the masters or gets an internship with one of these masters, which I know you're offering, a recommendation letter from someone like that can be very, very helpful. And it's not so much that this person is like a very prestigious person that has some sort of reputation, though that can be impressive. What matters is that the student has gone, above and beyond and made an impression on someone who regularly sees very talented people, right? And they've decided to take the time to talk about your student. So that's another thing that ties into your program I wanted to highlight here, that outside recommendations are accepted by most schools and can be very helpful to fill out a picture of a student. Okay, let me get more water. You can ask me this one while I drink.
Yes, I know I asked this question to you before, Sheila. How has the pandemic affected this process?
Right, so we talked a little bit about test optional. That's one of the first things that people saw, right? Last year, all the tests were canceled. It was very hard to get a test. Some students were able to do it, but they were putting themselves at risk by traveling during COVID or being indoors during COVID with total strangers. And the COVID protocols were not always that good at these test sites. But it is opening up more now. The test optional movement has been in place for a long time. Before the pandemic, there were over 1,300 colleges in the United States that were test optional. But of course, now there are even more. And many of them took the opportunity of the pandemic to put in place a 3-year pilot. So Tufts University, for example, has a 3-year pilot of test optional right now. So not just last year, but this year and the next year. BU is doing a similar thing. Many other colleges are doing it. And my prediction is that more and more colleges will go test optional because they've realized they can do college admissions without the tests, right? They've known that for a long time, but this time they were actually forced to do that, right? So my recommendation here is that if you can score at or above the average for the colleges that you're applying to, you should take a test and submit it, right? If there are limiting factors, finances, time, for example, as I mentioned the examples before, students who are struggling in class or things like that, or if it's going to take too long for you to get to that goal score, then it's worth considering going test optional. And there are some excellent schools that are test optional. I just mentioned Tufts and BU. University of Chicago has been test optional for many years. All of the University of California schools are test blind, right? So it doesn't mean it's not a selective school if they're test optional. In fact, they may be more selective. I mean, Chicago went test optional, I think in 2015, and their average SAT and ACT scores every year have gone up since then. So in ways it has become more selective, right? It doesn't reflect on the quality of the school at all. And in fact, it's probably something for equity purposes that will go away more and more over the years. But again, this year, if you want to put yourself in the best situation, I would talk to somebody who knows how to advise you on this, but keep those general tenets in mind. You really want to have a very good score, higher than the average at the colleges you're applying to, for it to make a difference. If you can't get there, and it's fine if you can't, these scores don't measure your intelligence, they just measure how well you take these tests. If you don't think you can get there, don't bother. Invest your time somewhere else. Another challenge I'm hearing from a lot of parents is that we can't do college visits, or they're just limited. I'm doing this online webinar, but they all sound the same. How do you really research colleges? That is a really big challenge, and it's very difficult for students to know, do I like this college enough to do early decision or early action there? Or how do I tell this college apart from the others? How do I make myself stand out at that college if I can't tell how that college stands out from the others, right? And there are a lot of resources for this. I really do recommend tapping into local networks. So students at your high school who've gone off to those colleges, talk to them about their experiences. Even if you can't take an official tour, if you can drive through the campus, try to drive through it, or, you know, do one of the virtual tours, but check review sites. And many times the admissions offices, if you contact them, they will be able to put you in touch with a current student, and then you can ask all of your questions there too. So you're going to have to do your research in different ways. I think most colleges will be open for visits by the fall. So next year, seniors, you may still have time to visit. But my suggestion is do as much research as you can, get your list narrowed as much as you can, apply, and then, you know, visit before you have to make a decision, because you don't have to make a decision until May. So you have May 2022. So you have a lot of time, and hopefully we will be able to do visits before next summer. Another thing that we saw happen this year is because students were not able to visit colleges and narrow their lists, but also because everyone was so freaked out about how does admissions work without extracurriculars or test scores or pass-fail grades or remote school? How does any of this work? They just applied everywhere. So the number of applications that students submitted went through the roof, right? Most students submitted more applications. Also, more applications skewed towards the more selective colleges, because, you know, now that Harvard is not requiring the SAT, a lot of students went like, oh, I should try that, you know, even if they would have had an SAT score that they knew Harvard would never look at. Now that they don't have to submit an SAT score, they said, hey, why don't I try it? So the application numbers at some of the most selective schools went through the roof. And what that did was it drove admissions rates down. So it became even harder to get in because Harvard still only has 1,600 spots for its freshmen. Right. And last year, one of the things that happened was that people deferred their admission. So not this year's seniors, but the previous year's seniors didn't want to start college remotely. And so many of them decided to take a gap year. They deferred their admission. So the colleges had to hold a spot for them this year. And that means instead of offering 1,600 spots, Harvard had, I'm making this up, I don't know their actual number, 1,400 spots to give to this year's seniors. Right. So that also drove down the acceptance rates. Because of all of this uncertainty, because colleges could see this happening, more applications than ever, spots to hold, different data to use in the evaluation process, colleges increased their use of the wait lists. I've never seen anything like this year, the amount of students that were waitlisted. And it's challenging, and my heart really breaks for a lot of these students because they're just still waiting to figure out where they're going. And some of these students are, really, really strong profiles, high test scores, really great grades from excellent schools, wonderful essays. But the colleges are nervous about wasting an acceptance spot on someone who's not going to take it. So at a lot of schools, they waitlisted even the strongest students because they weren't sure they were their first choice. So there are things you can do to communicate your interest in a school, your dedication, your commitment to a school if they were to accept you. But I think we're going to start seeing these colleges pull from wait lists in the next week or so, really, because May 1st for most schools was the deadline that this year's seniors had to decide where they were going to go. So in the next week or two, colleges are going to know how many spots they still have to fill, and they're going to start pulling from those wait lists. So hopefully the wait will be over for a lot of students soon, but it's hard to tell whether these trends are going to continue next year, right? So one thing that we're thinking about is we saw also geographic rush. A lot of students in the Northeast were very disappointed with their admissions results from schools in the Northeast because, I use that example because we're based in Boston, colleges are looking to diversify geographically. And with the pandemic, when last spring, all these college students were sent home from school over a weekend, everyone said, I want to go to college closer to home. I have not heard from a single family who said, we want him to go as far as possible. They all said, we want my student to be within driving distance. So in case something happens, we can just go pick them up and we don't have to worry about them being stuck on the other side of the country. So the geographic concentrations kind of changed. And so I use this example, I had a really strong student from the Boston area, 1530 on her SAT, did not get into Northeastern, but got into Macalester with an $80,000 scholarship. Macalester's in Minnesota, right? Not many. I mean, there are people from the Northeast who want to go to college in Minnesota, but not many, right? And so she was much more attractive to that school that they offered her this huge merit scholarship. So that's also something to consider, the sort of strategic selection of schools so that you maximize your chances of a great education. These are just some of the impacts of COVID. Every student, of course, is going to be different. And we're still waiting on more information as this year's application round is just coming to a close. We'll have more clarity about this over the summer, I'm sure, but these are all things you want to keep in mind as you move forward towards college admission. Okay, I only have like 2 slides left. I think that you have gotten a sense of this from how I talk about what we do at Signet, but we make personalized matches with our mentors. And we really recommend strengthening your profile throughout high school, not just waiting until senior year to start thinking about college. And we have all kinds of academic support. We do test prep. we do executive function coaching, and of course we do admissions consulting. We work with students to develop what we call an inspiring yet realistic college list, right? So we want a range of schools that they would be happy at any of them, but the difference is some are more selective, some are less selective. And throughout the process, we're always encouraging this idea of personal growth, self-reflection. And the thing that parents really love, I mean, parents love that part too, but the thing that parents really love is that we take over the timeline management accountability. Parents don't have to nag their kids, worry, when are you getting this done? That's what we do. We make sure that they're staying on track, that drafts are done when they need to be done, things are submitted when they need to be submitted. And we work on building students' own accountability, but we are sort of an outside check on that as well. And that can be very helpful to a parent because this is a very stressful process. And the more stress we can take off of your plate, the better. So here are my main takeaways from this talk. Remember that admissions officers are people who know a lot about their school and they read a lot of applications. So in order to stand out, you need to be genuine and you need to be strategic in all the ways that I've talked about. And the sum, of course, is greater than the parts. That overall narrative is really important, but those parts really, really matter. So do what you can now to strengthen each part, your grades, your rigor of your transcript, your narrative that shows up in your essay, your activities list, your teacher recommendations, all of it. And make sure every piece of your application really supports that central story, because otherwise when they read your application, they're just going to be confused. You really want them to say, oh yeah, that's the student who grew up on the pig farm in Iowa and got really interested in genetics. I do have a student who's at Harvard now who that was his story. It was a very clear story you know, very unique. And that's how they remembered him. So you want to think about that. It's sort of like your elevator pitch, which I'm sure, you know, those of your students who are in the entrepreneurship program will hear all about. So that's my presentation. I do have about 15 minutes. If there are questions, we can go through them. This is my contact information. You can call, that's the office line, but it does go to my cell phone. I do have a secretary who answers it, but I also get the calls. You can text at that line or just email me directly at sheila@signeteducation.com. And I will also put that in the chat so that any of you who have questions can email me directly.
Thank you so much, Sheila. This is very helpful. Although I talk with you a lot, I still learn a lot from this presentation. And I just also want to, this is wonderful. I want to mention very quickly, our summer school also always want to strive to find ways to help our students through the communication with Sheila for the past month. We are trying to craft a program that her wonderful former admission officer will help our students for a session with the essay writing. And we're trying to help train the kids to use what they're doing in, you know, as a project from our summer school and put in an essay. And that essay can be really turned into something that you can submit through college application. So it's a win-win situation.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very excited about that. I think that'll be a really fun workshop that we'll put on for you.
Yep, so are we. We're excited about that. But so let's start the Q&A. The first question is, could you please provide the academic threshold for the most prestigious schools?
Sure. You'll hear me say this a lot when you talk to me. It always depends, right? It depends on what we mean by prestigious schools. And it also depends what else your student has going on. So the threshold for recruited athletes would be very different from somebody who's, you know, a purely academic student. I would say the higher the better for the most prestigious schools. So if we're talking about the Ivy League schools, right? It's not that someone with, I'm going to make this up, lower than a 3.6 GPA doesn't have a chance, but they would really have to have some amazing teacher recommendations or extenuating circumstances that might explain the dip in their grades, or summer activities, independent projects. Maybe they started a business that's very successful, you know, and that would sort of counteract, I would say, the grades. But the grades do really matter, because at the end of the day, if you imagine a college admissions officer is comparing two students, both of whom are you know, amazing, contribute to their community, seem like great kids, and one of them has a 4.0 and the other has a 3.5. Who do you think will be more successful at a rigorous college? It's going to be the student with the higher GPA, right? So there isn't a cutoff that you're going to find that's published anywhere, but you know, we do have, and I can send this, Mung and Linnell, I can send this. We have a resource where we put together the average freshman GPA, like of their high school GPA, and their average test scores for various categories of schools. So you can see that if you have a lower GPA, unweighted, of course, you have a lower GPA and a higher test score, you're still okay, right? But it gives you a sense of what the threshold is for different types of schools based on their selectivity. And you can also find that information by just looking at the college's website. They do normally publish what they call the admitted students profile, or a freshman profile. And it will tell you what the average SAT score or ACT score was, what the average GPA was, and things like that. And so that's a very good measure of, you know, for each school, what is considered competitive, what is considered average. Many high schools also provide services like Naviance or Square that will actually collect data from past students from that high school, showing what their GPAs were, what their test scores were, and how they fared at various colleges. So those are the resources I would encourage you to use, especially because GPAs are measured differently at every high school, right? So you've got to be kind of specific with the data that you look at. I hope that's helpful. It's kind of a hard question to answer.
It's good to know you can find something from their website and also from you too. So the next question is, thanks for sharing all these insights. For those kids who don't know which specific major or field of study to pursue, can you share some advices on college application strategy?
Yeah, I actually think it's better for them not to know what they want to pursue. The average college student in the United States switches their major 3 times in college. And I know we like to say, well, those are those other students, not my student, but it happens. It really does happen. The college application does have a place for you to list what is your intended major, or you could select 3 sometimes. And some schools will ask that specifically, you know, what majors are you interested in? If students know, they should put that down, because then they can talk about how their extracurricular activities, you know, lend them to this interest or whatever it is. But if they don't know, that's actually perfectly fine. They might have some idea, right? It's going to be within the sciences, or it's something to do with literature. We don't really know what yet. They don't have to have a very specific idea, but that's something that their college counselor at school can work with them on. Somebody like us, we could work with them on that, helping them explore various areas. You might even work with someone who can help you think about strategically what is the best major to put down, right? You can think about what are the most popular majors at that college. Don't put one of those down, right? Like, don't put down economics if you want to go to Stanford. Don't put down course 6, which is the electrical and computer science major at MIT. That's what everybody does, right? That's going to be the most selective. And while admissions officers aren't exactly evaluating people because of their major, they do have a mandate to try to keep things balanced. They can't have everybody in one major, right? Not just because that doesn't look good for a school, but their other departments need students to keep those departments alive, right? So they want to maintain some sense of balance across all of these majors. So that's one thing to think about there is there an advantage to applying, saying you have a different major? And it should be realistic that the student would want to study that, but it may not be, you know, the exact major that they're thinking about. That also helps, I think, with pre-med students. You know, particularly if you're sort of light on the pre-med activities, if you haven't shadowed somebody or volunteered in a hospital or done things that really prove that you are interested in medicine in a deep way, not putting a pre-med major can be helpful, because then you're not kind of compared against the other pre-meds. I say that with like an asterisk next to it, because for some schools you have to declare which major you want because they're housed in a different college, right? So at Carnegie Mellon, for example, there is a computer science major that is within the School of Computer Science, and there's also a computer science major that's in the College of Arts and Sciences, right? And at some colleges, it's hard to switch between those schools that are within a college. This is getting complicated, but depending on where you apply, you need to be careful about what you put down as a major. So that's something certainly to talk with somebody about.
Yes, that sounds very complicated.
It is. Yeah, sorry, I didn't have a clear answer for that one.
So the next question, but if you want to understand more, Sheila definitely would be the go-to person. So when to start prepare college admission, when to talk to your team?
Yeah, that's great. And I see that somebody actually just asked another question of, can you give an example of how you'd prepare a 10th grader? So I can answer both of those at the same time. So we work with students as early as freshman year of high school. Even before freshman year, I have 2 students who just finished their 8th grade year. They just signed on with us and we're talking with them. We spent some time talking with their families about choosing the high schools. They were considering going to the public school versus going to an independent school, and we helped them think through that process. I even helped the student write one of her essays to a private school, and she did get in. So we can do things like that. Help you think about decisions you have to make now that will impact things in the future. We like to, in 9th and 10th grade, really start in on these sort of fundamental skills of self-reflection, building a vision for yourself, and things like that. So that's more of the holistic stuff that we do at that point. We can also help students and parents understand where skills may be lacking and where you want to increase your involvement, maybe in an extracurricular, build a stronger teacher relationship here or there, or improve your academic performance. I have a student who is a 10th grader now who has said all along that he's very interested in business, but his math grades are really terrible. And so we've had a lot of conversations with him about how math relates to business. And we've been working with him now on improving his math skills and his study skills for math. So that's kind of one example. But really it covers everything from choosing which classes to take, choosing how to spend your summer, even applying to summer programs if they have applications, keeping an eye on the academics as they go along, being able to suggest, you need a tutor here, or, get extra help from your teacher there. Keeping an eye on the testing timeline. We usually start with after their 10th grade year. That's when we really start doing the diagnostic process and making a recommendation about which test to focus on, whether you need it or not. That's important to do well before the start of junior year, because it just gets crazy for students in 11th grade. So we'll keep an eye on that. And we'll also be developing a relationship with the student that helps us understand who they are, what their narrative is, and even do writing exercises with them to either help them improve their writing or get practice for that college application. I started working with a student at the end of his 10th grade year last year, and he was applying to a summer program. I helped him with that essay. And now that essay has morphed and changed and will probably be the heart of his college essay as we go forward, right? So it's so great to feel like we don't have to worry about the college essay. Most of his classmates are, freaking out about it. They're going to spend all summer working on it. They don't know what to write, but he's already got a good draft. We're going to continue revising it, but we've gotten that out of the way because we've known each other for so long now. So it's really, really beneficial. And we find that it takes the pressure off of the end of junior year and senior year, where high school does get more challenging. And they can kind of front load some of these other things that will relieve that tension, but also give them more time to work on those crucial elements. So we help kind of shape their application package even earlier than their senior year. And one of my consultants says it best. She talks about herself as though she's a stylist. And she says, I can't buy you new clothes. I'm going to use the clothes that are in your closet to help you put together the right outfit, for your application, basically. But when we work earlier with students, we actually can help them pick those clothes and help them think about what are the activities that they could do now that would look really good on their college application, but are also meaningful to them and useful to them in their everyday lives. That's how we work with younger students.
That's great. Thank you, Sheila. So probably this is the last question for you. We know we have to let you go and let everybody go very soon. And thank you everybody for staying this late with us, especially on the East Coast. So how much weight does a published research add to a student's profile?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's hard to quantify, but it certainly does help. It shows a lot of different qualities about a student. One, that they were able to do this higher level research with probably some sort of research mentor or something like that, that they had the ambition to do something like that. And then of course that they had the skills to carry out this research, that they learned something in the laboratory or through the writing process, that they have writing skills. It also indicates their desire to do that kind of work in the future. And that's one of the things that colleges are trying to do by looking at their applications. They're looking at what have you done during high school, and then predict forward from that, what will you do in college? Right? So if you've got a high school student who has already engaged in independent research and even has a publication, that is a strong piece of evidence that they will continue to do that in college. And the more publications, the better in academia, right? Professors, get promoted and paid based on the number of their publications. So if they're bringing on a student who already has a published paper, probably they will do more. That's really great. It's something that professors really love to see, and that admissions officers really love to see too. But it does matter the quality of that publication, right? So it should be a peer-reviewed journal. It can't just be the local newspaper or self-published on the internet, right? So it's really important to think about that, and that can affect your choice of the research mentor. If they are able to help your student get something published, or if they can be a second author on something, that's really great, because a professor or a PI at a lab is going to go through that academic publishing process. So it's great for a student to be able to do that. Particularly, we see that being extremely helpful for students who are applying to those combined medical programs where you get admitted to college and med school at the same time, essentially. Students who have publications at the high school level tend to do very well in those application cycles.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Sheila. And thank you.
You're very welcome
for staying late with us, but providing so much helpful information. We really appreciate it.
Yep.
And we look forward to working with you this summer and help our families together to get our students move up. And for the parents, thank you so much for joining tonight. We will have a few sessions going on for the next few weekends. Please feel free to join us on the WeChat, or just email us at, I'll put it here, if you have any question. We hope everybody have a good night and hope to see you next weekend. Thank you so much. And thank you
everyone. And happy Mother's Day.
Oh, yes.
Yes, happy Mother's Day, everybody.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye now.